21st.
Good evening and welcome to the February 25th, 2019 joint meeting between the Select Board and the School Committee. I'd like to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Tonight is the first of two evenings in a row that we'll be interviewing candidates who have applied to be appointed to fill the currently 4 vacancies on the Long Meadow School Committee. And what I wanted to do is let people know that originally this was scheduled for one night. We found that we had 10 applicants and it wasn't going to be fair, I think, to try to do that all in one evening. We would have really crushed the last candidates down to a short period of time. So with the approval of everybody on this panel, we agreed to do this over 2 nights, and the split was pretty good in terms of, I thank Debbie House from the Select Board's office for contacting the candidates. So 5 people will be interviewed this evening, 5 people will be interviewed tomorrow evening. The 5 people we'll be interviewing this evening are Peter Landon, William Mitchell, James Ryan, Kevin Reisig, and Kevin Shea, and they are all here. Just to go over the procedures that we're following tonight, and we will follow again tomorrow night, is the candidates will draw by lot the order in which they'll be interviewed, A, B, C, D, or E. We're also going to draw by lot the order that the panel here will do the interviewing, with the exception that the school committee chair, Mr. Armin Ray, will get to ask the first question. I'll ask the second question, and then it will alternate between Select Board and School Committee members in order. We'll continue to ask questions until nobody has any more questions. We'll do one at a time, and then we'll go a second round, and if need be, a third or a fourth, or however long it takes to go through the process. After we've interviewed one candidate, that candidate will be excused. They're certainly welcome to stay, and it's an open meeting, and then we'll go on to the second candidate in the same order. We will ask questions of those candidates again in the same order that we did. There's no obligation to ask the same questions to any of the candidates. Because the second round of interviews will be, not the second round, because the interview of the second group of applicants will be tomorrow night, the policies of the Select Board and School Committee and our town, I guess their bylaws require us that we wait at least a minimum of 7 days, and so our appointment meeting will be on Tuesday, Tuesday, March 5th, excuse me, that's a week from tomorrow. And we're going to have that meeting here at 5:30 p.m. It's going to be at 5:30 p.m. because there's a district-wide school project or program, and we've been asked to do that earlier so that we can be completed by 6:30 or 7 o'clock when that district-wide program begins on Tuesday, March 5th. So unless anybody on the panel has any questions about the procedures that we're going to follow, and I will comment that I believe this procedure that we're using for the interviews for drawing lots has been emailed to everybody on our panel. I believe all the candidates has gotten it as well, and so it's not something we're making up as we go along. We've actually established this as a policy. So what I'd like to do is, I've got letters, I've got a little plastic bag here. What I'm going to do is put numbers in here and shake them all up, and I'm going to have the candidates, I'm going to go out to just to have the candidates each pull a letter, and then we'll get their order.
Love the high-tech paper bag.
What I'd like to do is just get down the letters that people selected. I'm just going to call the names. Mr. Landon?
A.
A. Thank you. Mr. Mitchell?
E.
Mr. Ryan?
B.
Mr. Isaac?
D.
And I'll assume Mr. Shea is a C?
Got it.
Love it when a plan comes together, huh? And we've got just 2 school committee members. So we've got Monwin, you and grab one. Ryan, that's yours. And what I'm going to do is, I'm going to do the same thing for the select board members, who we've got frequency order for them too.
Is this how you spend your days, Mark?
This is what I get the big bucks for. Just for that, Rich, you get the one left over. How's that?
Come on, I see which end of the table you started at anyway.
Okay. Bill? There you go.
Yeah. There's only one. There you go.
Thank you. So we're going to go down Bronwyn,
5.
Bill Lowe,
7.
Ryan,
3.
Marie,
8.
Rich,
6.
and Tom.
4.
Okay, worked out. So the order of questioning is going to be Armin Ray, myself, then Ryan Kelly, then Tom Lacusa, then Bronwyn Moynihan, then Richard Foster, then Bill Lowe, then Marie Angelides, and then we'll take the same cycle again. If anybody wants to, I've got a little score sheet here if you want to. Somebody else wants one? I've got a couple more left over just to track it down. And Diane, you've got one too, so just we can keep track of these things. So
I got it. It's on the computer.
Yeah.
okay, that's great. So unless anybody has any other questions at this point, what I'd like to do is call Mr. Landon to come forward, give you a minute or two to make a statement, and then we're going to start with questions.
Good afternoon. Peter Landon, 5 Meadowbrook Road. The reason I applied for the position is that I wanted to be part of a team that brought back a sense of normalcy and calm and improved the climate in education in Long Meadow. I wanted to support the budget that's already been worked on and approved by the school committee. I wanted to work on the implementation of the school improvement plan as I've seen it outlined. And I want to basically bring everything back to the eyes of the child, the student. And I joined the district learning team way back when with Dr. McGarry, superintendent of schools. Eyes of the child was the first time I had seen that term, and it's continued to be a motto for the school system. Tom McGarry also brought in continuous improvement, and as a concept, it was a Malcolm Baldrige concept at that time, and that's evolved and become a refined. I've looked over the plans of the school committee and the superintendent, and I really think a lot of work and a lot of progress has been done in Long Meadow. I was impressed. I saw Armin Ray comment on the superintendent's report the other day. I thought that I concurred after I read the February 14th review of what has gone on in half a year. So basically, education has changed a lot over time, and I'm also impressed with the social and emotional learning components that are being built into the infused into the curriculum. I think it's would be a aid towards curtailing and cutting down on substance abuse and anxiety and stress of students within the system over time. There's a lot of good work going on there. I spent my life in a classroom. Of course, as a student, I taught for a decade and plus in the MBA programs at both Western New England College and at the University of Massachusetts Eisenberg School, courses in marketing, finance, and commercial bank management. Advocacy is something that shows up as a term in the planning, and I feel I could be an agent to advocacy because I do have tentacles into communities, and I have tentacles into, I'm on the Chamber of Commerce of Springfield's State Budget Committee. Been working on state budget issues for a year, and one of my pet peeves, I guess, is that local aid for a middle-income community, which Longmeadow is now classified on the system, state has for reimbursement is of local aid, in my opinion, is not fair. And I will turn it over to you, Mark, for other questions.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to start with questions, and Armin, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Landon. What do you think is the single greatest challenge facing our schools this year?
This year, I think it's climate, and I think it's getting on with business. It's not magic that's required. I think it's just implementation of a lot of good work that's already in place.
Okay. My question, Peter, is what qualifications do you have for making you capable of helping to set policies for the school district?
You know, it's interesting. I read all the policies in 12 categories in the school department. They're the most voluminous that I've seen, and I think I compare them, having been on the Charter Commission and the Charter Review Committee. The policies for the schools are basically a compilation of what we would call on the town side, the charter itself and the bylaws and the administrative code. If you take a look at the section on finance in the schools, you'll go down and it'll go right into how you should set up your accounting system. I'm more familiar with policy at a broader level, the kind that we have in the town for debt management or other issues. We have less policies than the schools, but that's piggybacked on a national standard, the schools' policies. I think they're vital. I agree with Armand Ray's comment. The role of the school committee member is in policy and not in administration. And obviously the roles, I read the roles and responsibilities of a school committee person. That's a tremendous document, and I read all the way down the line on that. So did I answer your question?
I was just looking, to what experience you have or qualifications for setting policies.
For setting policies. Lifelong work and education.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Kelly.
How can our district know when we have an effective school program?
I think, data management with students, parents, collecting information from surveys. I know the expansion of surveys that is mentioned, and I say again, Ryan, effective what?
School program. How do we know that it's going well?
Program. Well, give me an
Yeah.
example of what.
So how do we know it's going well? What kind of data
like
would you be looking
substance
for?
abuse or whatever?
And whether it's academics,
curriculum
SEL,
alignment?
all of it, yeah.
Okay. I think it's data and review of data and getting opinions from many sectors. I know the outreach program that's outlined in the improvement plan is going to mean that you're going to get a lot more input if it can be effectively put together.
Good.
Right?
Mr. Lucusa.
So thanks for coming in tonight.
My pleasure.
So if conflicts were to develop between the school board and the superintendent, how would you feel about working with a mediator to process the conflicts that had developed? So,
I thought we were beyond that.
well, we don't know that. So
The-
if there was conflicts, how would you feel about sitting with
Well,
a mediator?
I
to-
managed people my whole life, and
Mm-hmm.
I know arbitration processes, the good and bad of it, and
Mm-hmm.
I just a calm demeanor, I guess, is the best way to approach things like that, and good listening skills
Mm-hmm.
to sort out what you're hearing and keep the emotions down as much as possible.
Okay, but you wouldn't have any problem with the superintendent meeting with the school committee to process that stuff?
To do what?
Having the school committee meet with the superintendent and a mediator, you think that would be?
I don't
You've done that
have an
before?
opinion. I'm sorry.
Oh,
I would have to go think about that
Mm-hmm.
and not just answer that right on the top of my.
okay, thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. I was just wondering, what do you think about the current focus on STEM in the Long Meadow Public Schools?
I think it's crucial. I think it's vital. I think, the fact that women don't drop out in the latter or in the middle grades on math and science, that work has to be emphasized, and that STEM is huge. And I'm part of a group, we just approved a STEM program for Elms College where they're working hard. And of course, they've had a women's focus for forever, although it's co-ed now. STEM's been around a long while. I haven't seen the data as to how much progress it's making, but definitely. And the digital world, they go together, science and technology and the math.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Foster.
Yeah. Why now, Pete? You've been in town
Well-
for many years. Why now?
My wife, I lived in a home where my wife corrected papers till midnight, many nights of the week in the school system. I love the school system. I just thought it was a great opportunity to go in and be a supporter, and that's clearly my goal of the plans that are in place, and the duration was very attractive. If I were signing for I wouldn't be here for a 3-year stint, but I'm here. And whether I would go for a 1-year stint, I leave open, but my inclination right now is if there are strong candidates that I think I would not go beyond the 4 months that are before us.
Why?
Why?
Yeah, but why?
Why?
What? Let me ask you. Let me
Because,
let me phrase it a different way.
Yeah.
And I wonder. I know you, Pete, and you know me. So, but you've been in the community for a long while, and all of a sudden you're dying to fill a 4-month position, and I just wonder why.
There was a little bit of showboating going on at the last town meeting by people, and that bothered me tremendously. I think the town that I've worked hard for was getting banged around pretty badly, and I think this is an opportunity to step up. I guess, why did you run for select board?
It's
Twice, 3 times,
good. Yeah. Well, once you get trapped in, you can't get out.
Okay, well, I'm not trapped yet, so.
Yeah.
Bill?
Okay.
You've already answered all my questions, but what do you see as the opportunities and the challenges in this school district?
The opportunities are unimaginable. I mean, today's world, what's opening up in education, it's mind-blowing. Yeah. I follow a lot of it. I work with venture capital firms in Tech Spring and Valley Ventures in downtown Springfield, and it's based. Tech Springs are based on education for healthcare, and what's going on and what's feeding in is very promising. It's also very scary because of the technologies we know that are getting enhanced. I don't see any downside for a system that has, if you look at the numbers in where Long Meadow is today in terms of recognition by state and local and national, even national entities, we're in a good position. You know, I think we have a lot of constraints that I've worked hard on, the tax ceiling, and I really, one of the things I think that the strategy that could work is being highly efficient with our limited dollars, or our constrained dollars. They're not limited, but they are constrained, and particularly constrained because we don't get our fair share, in my opinion, of local aid for education. The formula is going to even be skewed further as proposed in the current bill in the House. Sky's the limit, Bill. For younger people, Mr. Foster.
Marie?
So I wasn't quite sure of your answer. You're not going to pull papers, or you're still thinking about whether to
I'm
run
thinking
for
about it. I want to
office?
see how it all comes together, and for what, there's 2 or 3 one-year slots there, right?
Yeah.
Do you specify the number of years you're running for when you go? Okay. So I would not do that if I see a group of candidates where I feel very confident they will continue in it. If it becomes a dissident group in my mind, I would probably stay on.
All right, thank you.
Armin?
I'm satisfied.
Okay. What experience and what systems would you use for evaluating a superintendent of schools?
What systems?
Yep.
I haven't seen the current system, so I can't comment on that. I've been through many evaluations on both sides, and you know, you always look at background, education, performance, you know, really performance to plan. I would look at performance to plan. I would look at the quality of the plans. I would, you know, look at the and get some reactions. Do a 360 kind of evaluation where you get input from the principals, and the students, and the teachers, all the groups, and of course the parents. Parents are key here. Did I answer your question, Mark? Okay.
Thank you. Ryan?
What should a school committee member do when contacted by a parent with a problem with a school?
Well, I heard your discussion on that the other day, Ryan. So clearly, or I read Mr. Ray's comment, one or the other, and I concur that to jump into the middle of a situation like that is not a good idea, and it should be handled administratively unless it escalate. The word escalate, I thought was a good use of that term. If it escalated beyond out of control, it obviously could end up at a school committee level. But if we look at the roles and responsibility, I almost said are, if we look at the roles and responsibilities clearly on the policy side, and that's where I mentioned the depth of the policies. And if you look at those and compare them with the policies on the town side, there's a stark difference. So depends on how you use the term. I would say the broad policies. Yeah.
Okay. Peter, I imagine you've been in a number of groups over the years, and so this is in some ways just another group. And what do you think is the most valuable components of a productive working group like a school board?
I think it's taking a body material. I mean, in this state, the Department of Education, secondary education, is big in setting policy and plans. I read detailed information on social emotional learning today done by the state. They've got all kinds of guidelines they've established. They got measurement systems. I think a working body is one that has to work. I mean, it's all in, and it's not easy. And I compliment you folks for your time and effort here, because I know. I think the human relations, of course, Tom, between the parties, and respect for each other. Many more things that I probably are not articulating at this moment.
Okay, well, thank you. That's good.
I don't have any more questions. Thank you.
Okay. Rich,
No, don't have anything left.
Reed? That we're on. What should the role of the school committee be relative to containing sped costs in a district like Long Meadow?
Continue what kind of costs?
Special ed, sorry.
Well, I think the broader term that I've been reading in the material is differentiation, and whereas, you have people that go at a normal pace, and you have folks that require special attention, and how you fund it, I think, has been a dismal case of the state making promises or mandates and unfunded mandates, and they've thrown a lot of the burden for funding on the cities and towns who are struggling with it. And then they figured they would address it and change it with a severe means testing. But as I said earlier, means testing meant all the money that comes out of the pots of income and sales tax goes to 35 gateway cities in Massachusetts. And it's really difficult to do it. But I think that's why I thought the efficiency of what we have in place in special ed. I remember the days when I was on the finance committee when talking to the superintendents when they came through with their budgets. Special ed costs were out of control. The process wasn't being managed because it had been just as well as it is today. So I think it reminds me of billing in healthcare, where I was CFO for Sisters of Providence. The devil's in the details, and all the legal costs, some of the legal costs. I think you avoid them by being efficient in your administration of the process. And I'm not a specialist in special ed, but I have high respect and I understand the need. I look forward to learning more about how this school committee is controlling special ed costs, because I'm not an expert in that right now.
Okay, Ryan?
Might have been answered.
Tom?
Sorry.
Bronwyn? We're all set, we're all, I think, we're all fine. If anybody else has any last questions, otherwise, Peter, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lane.
Thank you.
Well, we're next bringing up Mr. Ryan. I just want to comment that that of the 10 applicants that we have, I just wanted to make people aware we've got an amazing group of people. I think if I counted correctly, 1, 2, 3, 4 of them are currently public school teachers in different districts. One of them is a former superintendent. 2 of them are university level professors, and so we've got an amazing group of people here that have applied, and I again want to compliment everybody on their application. So, Mr. Ryan, thank you for coming. I'll give you some time to make your introductory statement.
Sure thing. And thank you for having me here. I've seen a bunch of you guys a couple of times by now. So for those who I haven't met, my name is James Ryan. I live at 117 Crescent Road. My reason for reporting over here is, I mean, on one hand, no one can ever accuse me of not being tenacious. The other aspect is, in the wake of everything that transpired that led to these vacancies being open, in all of that, there was clearly a breaking of trust between the community and its school committee and between its government. I teach social studies. We talk about that plenty. We talk about the necessity of trusting your government, of having it comprised of people who will always put their own personal interests aside for the public interest. And so that's why I'm hoping to accomplish here. I'm hoping to restore trust, bring my years of experience in the classroom and in policy making to the school system. Through my work as a teacher and as a public servant, I've come to understand a little bit of what makes education systems and the boards that govern them work well, and that kind of comes down to quality leadership that creates the structures and supports that our schools truly need. Districts need to be empowered to bring on and retain the best quality staff. They must in turn empower administration and teachers to do their jobs. They must foster a culture of collaboration and work with each other and administration to develop cohesive policy and cohesive direction for the district, and to help see that carried out as best as possible. Without this culture, the ideals of sound fiscal stewardship, especially with an impending tax wall, addressing, of course, the behavioral health of all students, and addressing the achievement gap, these things become effectively impractical. And without an ability to work together, the process of meaningful policymaking becomes impossible. Longmeadow, just as much as any other district, needs leaders who will set personal interests aside to promote the public interest, to make the tough decisions necessary for our schools to succeed, not only now, but for generations to come. I don't have any children right now, but my plan is to have them and have them in this district. And I would like it to continue to be as a high-functioning and successful district when it comes their time. If you agree, I, appreciate your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Armin?
So, based upon your statement, what steps would you recommend the board take to rebuild that trust with the administration and staff?
First step, of course, I think you're doing it right now, is looking forward and having a thorough vetting process and recognizing who you believe would be great additions to the committee and great additions to Longmeadow's governance, and making sure that they are staffed well. You obviously need people who are experienced in policy making. You need people who are experienced in the education system. Heading on from there, there's obviously going to be there's going to be a growing period. That definitely happens. Anytime that you bring anybody on, let alone a good number of them, it comes down to building that culture, building that collaboration, and from there, if we truly are able to, come together and unite towards that common goal of making Longmeadow schools better, it becomes substantially easier to do so.
Great, thank you.
I'm going to ask this of several people who are applicants, but I continue to get struck by the memory of a prior elementary school teacher who was on the school committee who ended up resigning after a short period of time because of the time commitment and the requirements of time. And so my question is in a position where you're really tied up, what I'd say 8 to 3, or whatever, 7:30 to 2:30, or whenever, 8 to 5, whenever the date hours are, with a job that often requires daytime communications, how do you envision being able to juggle the requirements of your full-time job with what might be off-hour requirements or same time hour requirements of this position?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that's something that I've, meditated on, thought about, discussed with my wife, discussed with my family, and saying, this is something I'm looking for. I also spoke with my principal. She wholly supports it. And I think when it comes down to time management, everybody needs that. I've got a bunch of freshmen who are learning that this year especially. It's a very rigorous school, but at the end of the day, I wouldn't be getting into this. I wouldn't have appeared before you, I think it's 3 times now, if I wasn't absolutely sure that I would be able to do it.
Okay. Brian?
Thank you. How can our district know when it has an effective school program?
I've been in the belief that whether it's at the school level or at the district level, if you have any students who are not having their needs met, whether they be educational, behavioral, et cetera, then we've got a job to do. And so looking at it, setting clear, measurable, smart goals, saying here's what we seek to accomplish through our policy making, and by, of course, collaborating with administration and saying, okay, we've come together and we've determined this is what we want to get done. And if you look at it and then say, after a reasonable time period, hey, this has worked, then absolutely. I consider that an unqualified success.
Thank you.
Okay. So, Brian, thanks for coming in. So if conflicts were to develop between the school committee and the superintendent, how would you feel about the committee sitting down with the superintendent and a mediator to work through those conflicts?
Mm-hmm. So I've worked in mediation before. I've been either at the high school level, worked as an RA in college, and plenty of roommate conflicts come up. In some cases, they are relatively minor, and I have to say, do you really have to come to me for this? But at the end of it, at the point where an arbiter or any sort of mediation gets talked about, that indicates it's not a minor thing. It's not a minor lapse in communication. It's not a minor issue. At that point, mediation, I've seen it work highly effectively. I think that sometimes having a third party there available to really have an objective view on everything and to help work back towards that level of collaboration and being able to work together. If it got to that point, I would be comfortable with doing so. But I hope to have a good enough line of communication at any time to say, look, let's try and fix these things before it comes down to it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I just have the same question I had before, which is, what do you think about the current focus on STEM in the Long Meadow Public Schools?
A little bit biased. I am a history teacher. But yeah, at the same time, anywhere I've looked, it's been noted for a while that STEM is the way of the future. If we, our school system isn't, it's about building the citizens as well as the labor force of tomorrow. So if you are going to be recognizing that, hey, science and technology, engineering, everything else, if that's the future, you have to be forward thinking, you have to be forward planning, and so yeah, I'm entirely behind it.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Richard?
Yeah, I'm not sure how this fits in qualifications, just kind of kicking around a thought.
Sure.
You had mentioned restored trust, vetting process, and similar terms. And I guess I'm more than a little bit concerned. I guess I'm generally overall concerned. We've had issues going on in our community, and not one single applicant that I can see on the list of people that are coming for these positions have any more than secondhand knowledge of what occurred in our community. And I'm wondering how, I'm bothered that people seem to be sitting there trying to convince us that they're going to cure something that they know nothing about with buzzwords, et cetera. And I wonder, what can you do to assure me that you're going to look beyond newsprint and that you're going to be in there trying to figure out what is really taking place instead of an emotional burst forward? I'm not an emotional person. I really don't like that aspect when it gets into the management or the governance. I like statistical applications. I like looking at facts. I like looking at both sides of an equation before I jump out and make statements. And I'm not bothered by you. I'm bothered by, so far, the comments that I'm hearing and what I've heard in our community. So can you help me out, see that a little bit?
I would certainly hope so, and I think we're kind of kindred spirits on that. People who know me will say that in many cases I'm logical or can become dispassionate almost to a fault sometimes. So when it comes down to, it's very serious work. To have a situation, of course, emotions can run high. These things do happen. But at the same time, in reference to the vetting process, is understanding the people that you're bringing on have to be the kind of people that you look at them and say, you know what, that's the kind of person who is going to be as dispassionate as possible. That's the kind of person who is going to, that they genuinely care. And where I've seen this before, I served on a board a couple of years ago that I think was made up of maybe 9, 10 so people. And it had effectively been dysfunctional. People definitely had perspectives that they wanted to make sure that they shared. They had constituencies that they wanted to represent. They had issues that were very near and dear to them. And there were points where, people, the tension would be there, or we would end up having much longer meetings than needed to be done just because there was that tension. Within my first, I think, 20 minutes of my first meeting, it was at the point where I was made the vice chair within 20 minutes of the first meeting, and about a month later was elected the chair. And as a result, and the relationships that I was able to build with the people that I served with, and because we were able to set parameters, we were able to say, hey, we're all committed towards this thing. We're trying to affect good policy. And if you're on board with that, then this is what we need to do, and what steps can we take heading forward. And I know that this sounds probably to you as if, say, it seems hypothetical, but I've done it in the past, and I plan on doing it in the future. Okay.
Okay, Bill?
Same question. What do you see as the opportunities and the challenges in this particular district?
I see plenty of opportunity. Working in Springfield, it's definitely a different environment in terms of what things are already in place. There are certain issues that that we have to deal with in terms of a variety of aspects when it comes to our students and helping them succeed. So I would see that having those taken care of, and from what I've seen of the quality of Long Meadow Public Schools, it's the envy of a lot of students out where I work. And so to be able to have those in place, I mean, the sky really is the limit there. A challenge, of course, is, as mentioned, having a cohesive direction that everyone can reasonably say, yeah, I can get behind that. There may be a few things here and there that I'm not entirely thrilled about, but I can work with it. So having leadership, it starts up at the top. It starts with the school committee. It starts with the administration, the superintendent. It involves the principals. And I don't know, I feel like a lot of steps forward are being made. The behavioral and emotional aspect of it has been fantastic. And I think it comes down to saying, okay, well, what things can we grow on? What are some things that the schools, the teachers, the admin, et cetera, feel are going well? And what are some things that we've looked at and said, you know what, here's something that maybe we haven't been doing properly, maybe we should do it a different way. But for me, being able to solicit input from all stakeholders in this equation is going to be critical to determining all that.
Marie?
Are you interested in a more permanent position after June?
I have filed the paperwork and have the petition signatures taken care of and have begun fundraising. So yes, I do intend on running.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Armin?
I'm good.
James, quick, what qualifications do you possess that make you competent to set policies for the school district?
Sure. As mentioned before, working on a couple of boards. One was focused on drug policy, which extended into a continuum of dyslexia. It's obnoxious. Continuum of care, addressing things such as homelessness and education, human trafficking, in addition to drug policy. I had worked as a council member in a village council in Contra Costa Center, and the policies involved there ranged from transportation, since it was a transit hub, infrastructure, development of parks, what to do with a particular lot that we can't all agree on doing something here. So we'll keep on talking until we do. And then at the school site, I had the pleasure of serving on a TLT, a teacher leadership team, setting direction for the school itself. And seeing as we're in our second year of existence, it's really critical. And the great part about it is that there's very little that we disagree on, and when there is a disagreement, we recognize, hey, this is clearly something we should be paying attention to. So, and we work through it. Works out well. So, put them both together, I think you have a good school committee member.
Thanks. Ryan?
What type of data would you be interested in receiving from, so it's kind of two parts, from school administrators, if you want to evaluate how schools in particular are doing, as well as from the superintendent to evaluate him at the end of the year? What kind of data do you want from each?
I having been through that process, especially in building a relatively new school, kind of modeling things from the quality school review, something that there's a heightened emphasis on that in the empowerment zone. And so looking through it and saying, okay, what are some benchmarks that, the admin, the teachers, et cetera, came together and said, hey, here's where we are right now. And of course, having, a period whereby an outsider comes on in and says, hey, this is reasonable, here's some things I've observed, putting together an action plan from there, reporting that in, and then following up, seeing where they resulted from there. I would say along the similar vein for administrators and along with superintendent, really coming together and saying, okay, well, here are the things that the school committee would like to see, and here are some things that the superintendent and administrators are also looking for in terms of professional growth, et cetera. Coming together, agreeing on something and saying, all right, this is something that we came together on, and let's set forth, evaluate from there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tom?
Sounds like you've been in a number of groups and you've negotiated them. So what would you say are the most important components of a successful, productive working group, like a school committee?
Right. At the risk of sounding, like I'm parroting something here, but again, it has to come to the point where you are setting aside personal interest to advance public interest, and again, being genuinely willing to come together, being genuinely willing to collaborate. I've always believed you collaborate and cooperate whenever possible. You compromise where you must, but you must always do one of the two. If you truly have those two elements, you're going to be cohesive. You're going to work as a team, and ideally, you're going to be setting good policy too.
Thank you. Good answer.
Norman?
Thank you. If you had to select just one or two of your traits that you would feel would be the most effective, if you were a member of the school committee, what would you choose for yourself?
I think you can ask those closest to me, is that there have been often times where I have definitely put the needs of the community in which I'm working ahead of my own. There's times where, my wife will say, I really appreciate you being in communication about this all, but, do you really need to be after school on a Friday till about 5 p.m. working with students to form up and help advise their new organization, and then follow that up by helping them write a DBQ? Then I'll say, well, yes, but I try not to make it a habit. The second trait would be a genuine willingness to see all sides of an issue. People say, oh, well, there's, both sides. We have to listen to both sides. Sometimes there's a third side. Sometimes there's a fourth and an umpteenth side that you have to consider as well. And so a willingness to be open to ideas, to be open to policy alternatives, and recognizing that any good policy has to be weighed and measured. And having that perspective, I think, will certainly be appreciated and helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Rich? Phil?
No, I'm all set.
Marie?
No, thank you.
Norman?
All set.
Yeah. What experience have you got that would enable you to evaluate a superintendent?
I think that would come down to, as I've spoken with Mr. Kelly over here, is that coming together and setting parameters, setting goals. I think it's not the best policy, not the best way of going about it if you kind of hand the superintendent a set of, here, we want you to do all this. Well, that's good, but where's the input? Where's the perspective? Where's the buy-in from the superintendent of saying, well, in addition, I see where you're going here, I like that, and here are a few other things that I think would be really helpful, and here are a few things that I'm trying to accomplish until the next evaluation. And so helping set those together, making sure that everyone's on board with it, and then having a clear, objective. I mean, I use rubrics a lot. I assign a lot of essays, and so I set out as clear a rubric as possible. It's very easy. You look through and you go, all right, you did that, that's something we need to be working on, and you did that. So once you set a lot of clarity, once you set a lot of buy-in, then the process becomes simple.
Thank you. Ryan?
No, I'm good.
Tom?
I'm good.
Anyone? Who else? Go
I was
ahead.
just wondering if you decided if you're going to run for a 1-year or 3-year position, or if you're still deciding.
Still deciding. It all shakes out to, what becomes available. I intend on serving as long as I'm useful, and as long as I'm creating good policy, and as long as I'm a good contributing team member. So,
Great, thanks.
thank you.
Rich? Anything?
Done.
Bill? You're
All
all
set.
set, Marie?
Yeah.
Anybody else have? I have just one more question. And it's, what should the role of the school committee be relative to containing special educational costs within the district?
One aspect would be one of advocacy. When we look at, especially with the foundational formula, I know there's been a big to-do about a lot of services that we provide, and considering how much money we are receiving, the idea that there should be more. I think it's Springfield alone would receive close to 90 million or something like that, or maybe 190. I had a sheet and I was looking at it and thinking, we could do a lot with that, especially when it comes down to SPED programs, especially when it comes down to health, et cetera. So the other aspect comes in and saying, like, look, you can hope for the best, but you also need to plan for the worst. I think kind of going to the source of it, going into special ed classrooms, speaking with special ed teachers, speaking with parents, speaking with administrators, and saying, okay, here's the reality, here's what we're working with. I've had the pleasure of meeting and working with SPED teachers in the past, and they'll almost always be able to tell you, well, we could certainly use a little bit more funding, or in many cases a lot more funding. But looking at it and saying, okay, well, here is what we have, here's what we're trying to do, but for what we know, let's work together to figure out what the best use of resources is going to be.
I think I was the last one. Does anybody else have any additional questions? Mr. Ryan, thank you so much for
And thank
coming
you.
today and for applying. I really appreciate it. Thank you. I'm going to call up Mr. Kevin Shea. And you've got a couple of minutes. You want to make a statement, and then we'll
Sure.
ask questions.
Good evening. I just want to introduce myself to you so that you know who I am, and then I'll get to why I'm here. We moved to Longmeadow, my wife Jennifer and I, in 2002. We moved here because it was a wonderful community, had great schools, and we continue to just be very thankful that we live in this amazing community. Our two children, Matthew and Megan, grew up going to Longmeadow Montessori, going to Center School. I think fondly about my days of biking to school with them. They went to Center School, on to Williams Middle School, and now they're both in the high school. Matthew is a senior, and Megan is a sophomore. My engagement with the schools came through volunteering, doing chemistry demonstrations in their elementary and middle schools, volunteering for field day. So lots of really great memories of being involved with them in their schools. My dedication to the town has primarily come through the Longmeadow Softball Association. I coached Megan for 6 years. I've been on the board for, I think, 8 years now, the last several years as president. So I've been engaged in the community through that. I won I was honored to receive the 2016 Zundel Award from the Park and Rec Board for my dedication to the softball program. So that's something that has been a really powerful impact on my life, and I'm very thankful for having done that. My professional life, I teach chemistry at Smith College. I've been there since 2000, and that's been a wonderful opportunity for me to explore my passion for education, my passion for chemistry. I look forward to working with the amazing students, faculty, and staff at Smith every day. And it's something that's really shaped my professional life, the opportunity to work with the amazing folks at Smith. I really value the time in the classroom. I value the time in my research lab. And I value the time I get to work on service with all of my colleagues. I've had a variety of leadership roles at Smith. I've been the chair of the chemistry department, the chair of the East Asian Studies program. I was the director of the Shared Center for Teaching and Learning, and I'm presently the director of the Science Center. And so in those leadership positions, it's really been a great opportunity for me to grow and to help serve the folks at Smith and help lead them and be a mentor and really help others succeed by being a leader through service and through example. The reason I'm here before you tonight is I feel I owe a great debt to the Longmeadow schools for the experience my kids have had. And I was very disappointed with how things shook out over the last 4 or 6 months on the school committee. I felt like there was just a lot of acrimony, and I was very impressed with how the students and the staff and the teachers were very professional in how they handled themselves, and I felt like if I could provide support to the students and the staff and the teachers and the administrators through serving in this role, then it's the least that I could do. I look forward to the opportunity to serve on this temporary position. I've already filed papers for the one-year position, and I was just informed today that the signatures have been approved, so I'm ready to be on the ballot for that one-year position. So that's a brief overview of me and why I'm here. I look forward to answering your questions.
So I'll go back to my original question. So what do you think is the biggest challenge that the school committee faces right now?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, so first, I know I have a lot to learn, right? So, I mean, I'm sure there are challenges that I don't know about that I really welcome the opportunity to learn about. What I know from the outside, I think one challenge is trying to get the community behind everything the school committee is doing. It's pretty clear that it's been a contentious several months, and I would love for the community to see the committee functioning well and continuing to move things forward in a professional and respectful manner. I think the big thing on the agenda beyond that piece is what to do with the middle schools. And I really think trying to figure out how that's going to play out, hopefully get state support for that. I think that's going to be a really big item for the school committee and for the town.
Thank you.
What training or experience do you have that would enable you to be proficient in evaluating the superintendent of schools?
Yeah, I mean, at Smith, serving in the leadership positions I've served in, I've had to evaluate a variety of faculty members. And in my current position, there are folks that work underneath me. So I'm the faculty director of the Science Center. I evaluate the administrative director of the Science Center. And I mean, I think evaluating faculty, evaluating the administrative director of the Science Center is in some ways similar to evaluating the superintendent. I mean, the way that I work as a supervisor, I give folks a lot of freedom. I think the role of the school committee is not to micromanage the superintendent. It's to sit down, talk to the superintendent, figure out what the goals are, have a collaboration about what those goals are, set those goals, and then continue to see if those goals are met. And that's how I've managed the folks that have worked underneath me. We have regular check-ins. We have an annual evaluation where we sit down and talk about how'd you do trying to meet those goals? And we continue to move forward. I think it's a collaborative process. And it's one where, again, I feel like I've been effective in the roles that I've had at Smith, and I think I can bring that experience to the school committee.
Thank you. Right.
What should a school committee member do when contacted by a parent with a problem at a specific school?
Yeah, I mean, I think Armin laid that out pretty clearly. I think if it's a problem at a specific school, then that parent should be talking to the principal of the school. I don't think the school committee member should get involved in that, because my guess is most of us really don't have any idea what's going on. And I think the principal of the school is the right person to go to. If that principal has already been contacted and the parent is still unhappy with how things have gone, I think Armin, again, laid out that then goes to the superintendent. And again, I don't think that's something the school committee should get involved in.
Great. Thank you.
Tom?
Okay, thank you for coming in tonight. So if conflicts develop between the school committee and the superintendent, would you feel comfortable having the superintendent and the school committee meet with a mediator to discuss those conflicts?
Sure. I mean, I think one of the problems with the school committee in the past, or in the recent past, is that there wasn't that dialogue. I think that it's really important to recognize when relationships break down, it's usually both parties need to reevaluate and reassess and then come together. And I think if a mediator could help with miscommunication and things like that, why not? I don't think there's anything to lose.
Okay, thank you.
Norman?
Seeing your profession, you might be able to elaborate even a little bit more about the STEM. You see kids from everywhere coming into Smith, I'm sure, with all sorts of different skill sets in different areas. So I'm just curious as to what you think, how well Long Meadow is doing with the STEM, and areas you think could use improvement, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, I think the focus on STEM it's important, but I think, one of the things that we talk a lot about at Smith is the value of a liberal arts education, and I think we need to remember that. I think that I get concerned when people talk about too much specialization when you're in high school. You need to become a well-rounded person while you're in high school, because you don't really even know what you want to do. Even, when students get to college, they come into our classes, a lot of them don't even understand what chemistry is. And so they think we're crazy because we're professional chemists, but, because you just like balance equations or something, right? So I think a lot of it is you need to learn about what these things are. And I think if you specialize too early, you don't get a sense for that. And that's one of the things that I really like about Long Meadow High. I feel like that our students are broadly trained, and they should be. I think it's great that we have a robotics club. I think it's amazing that we have tons of AP classes. I think we do a wonderful job of educating our students broadly, which is what we should do. If students are really interested in STEM, wonderful, let's promote that. But let's not forget that I think a lot of our best students, and a lot of my best students at Smith, are also amazing dancers, amazing musicians. And we have such a wonderful tradition of that at Long Meadow High. That needs to continue, and we shouldn't just say, we need to focus on one area or the other. We need to develop well-rounded students. They're the ones who are going to succeed.
Thanks.
Richard?
Yeah, if you're up at Smith, and sounds like you have a lot of different committees and all that report to you, or have task force put together. If you had a committee or a task force came in with 6, 7 people making a recommendation to you, would you accept that recommendation, or if you disagreed with it or agreed with it, or would you spend your time trying to disprove that recommendation?
Would I spend my time trying to disprove the recommendation?
If you disagreed with it.
I guess I'd want to understand it. I'd want to sit down and talk to them and figure out where their recommendation came from. I'd like to think that I would have an open mind if my colleagues spent a large amount of time trying to figure out a solution to a problem or come up with a recommendation. I would respect the time and effort they put in. If I disagreed with it initially, I'd really like to understand where that came from. I think if I had a very strong opinion that was opposite of what they said, I would like to make sure my opinion was valid. If they brought information to me that I didn't have, then I'd like to think that I would change my mind. I think it's difficult to answer that question hypothetically, because
it's an everyday event. I mean, we run into this every day, so.
We do, but I mean, I don't think the way that I operate as a leader is not where I look to disprove what people bring to me. I look to have a conversation and a dialogue and have us figure out how we can move forward. That's why maybe I'm not answering the question the way that you want, because to me it's about a dialogue and it's about moving forward collectively. It's not about me being right or them being right. It's about us coming together to figure out how to make things better.
Oh, you answered it, fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bill?
What do you see as the opportunities and challenges in this district?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've got lots of opportunities. I think we're blessed with amazing families, amazing kids. We have great teachers. We have great administrators. We see an example of that just at the last school committee meeting where we heard about all of the amazing accolades and accomplishments in Longmeadow. So I just think there's lots of opportunities for us to continue to build on those successes. I think those same things are some of the challenges that we have to face. I think it's really easy to be complacent when people tell you you're doing well. And so I think we need to not become complacent. I think we need to push forward, figure out what other great schools are doing, how can we emulate them. I think we have to continue to attract great teachers and great administrators, and we need to attract great people to be on the school committee. So I think, to me, the challenge is making sure we're getting the best people to come here to lead us and to educate our kids.
Thank you.
Marie?
Longmeadow has a problem in that we're coming up to what we call our tax ceiling. And that could be in 2 years, it could be in 6 years, because it depends on how the variables fall every year. How comfortable or what experience do you have in dealing with a budget where you're really looking at cuts and restraints rather than a growing budget?
Yeah, I mean, I think we deal with that a lot at Smith. I mean, when we look at our budget in our department, it's been flat for the entire time I've been there, right? So we've had to manage to that because clearly costs are going, chemicals don't get cheaper, wages don't go down. So we've had to think about how to be more efficient and think about what things can we stop doing. And we've had a lot of discussions about that at Smith. It's really easy to add programs and not take things away. And so we've had a lot of discussions about that. It's hard, and it's very hard in the schools. It's just like at Smith. Most of our money goes towards paying people's salaries. So it's very hard because you're talking about people's lives and you're talking about, how do you do something with fewer staff? It's very hard to do those things, but I think you have to take a look at it and figure out if you can't do everything, where are your priorities, and then you react from there.
And I just wanted to clarify, you said you're going for the one-year term?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Armin? Question about the role of the school committee. What do you think the role of the school committee should be relative to containing special ed costs? And I just want to clarify that special education is a right in Massachusetts and an obligation of the community to provide it, but yet special education costs can be controlled, and I mean, some believe that the school committee can have an input into those policies. So my question really is, what do you think the role should be relative to containing costs, not whether or not we should be providing sped education?
Right, we have to. So, I mean, first, I want to be clear. I don't consider myself an expert on special education costs. There's a lot of things that, if selected to serve on the committee, I need to educate myself on. So, number one, I need to educate myself on this because, again, I don't think that I know it very well. Two, I think that this is one of the things that the school committee has to do, is to work on the budget. So, of course, the school committee plays a role in this. And to me, I think a lot of that goes along with having a collaborative relationship with the superintendent and the administration to figure out what are we doing now, how do we know if it's working, and how can we do it more efficiently. So I think it's a partnership and learning about what we can do and learning what other schools do. If we can learn how folks are doing it better somewhere else, maybe we can do things better.
Thank you. Ryan?
I'm all set, thank you.
Yeah, so you've been in a lot of effective groups, and the school committee will function as a group like any other. And what do you think are the most important qualities that you try to see develop in a group for them to be productive?
Yeah, I mean, I think number one, it really helps when you have a leader who is a selfless leader, who doesn't have their own agenda and wants to push the committee in a certain direction. So I think having selfless leadership and leadership that listens is really important. I think the members on the committee need to make sure they're doing their homework and bring a spirit of openness and willingness to listen to the work that's at hand. I think it really helps when you're able to develop a relationship and you know the folks that you're working with, so that you can disagree, but disagree respectfully and move on. Because you're going to have to disagree. You're not always going to agree on things. But, I mean, I think the key is being able to listen and to have open communication and to be honest with everybody on the committee.
Great, thank you.
You know?
Earlier, you mentioned getting the community more involved or making them more aware of what's going on with the school committee, which I completely agree with. Do you have any particular ideas for that?
I mean, I think that's a difficult one. I mean, I feel like I read an interesting letter to the editor during this whole process where it's like most people in the community really don't pay close attention to what happens in the select board or the school committee until something blows up. And then it's like everybody's involved, right? So how do you get people to pay attention when things aren't blowing up, right? And I think a lot of that is just trying to make sure that you're where people are. If that means that you need to have a presence on social media, or you need to make sure that, you know, people are reading something in the newspaper, whether that's a letter to the editor or a column or whatever. I mean, I think just trying to find people where they are is really important. And maybe that means that school committee members need to go to the schools more, so that they can be seen at the schools and parents can interact with them. Yeah, I mean, I don't think I have all the answers, but I think that'd be a great conversation to have on the school committee.
Great, thank you.
Richard?
I don't have anything else.
Bill?
I'm all set, thanks.
Marie?
Thank you.
I just was going to ask a question about evaluation of the superintendent of schools. No, I'm sorry, I was going to ask you about setting policies for the school district.
So what is the question?
So it's what qualifications, or how would you go about setting policies for school district, and what do you see as key elements of policies that ought to be set for the school district?
Well, I mean, first, I again, I'll say this continually. I need to learn a lot, right? I mean, I need to sit down with the members of the school committee and learn about what policies do we think need to be improved or addressed. Talk to the superintendent, talk to the administration. I mean, in my role at Smith, we've done a lot of setting policy, whether that's in the chemistry department, in the science center, you know, in a variety of committees that I've been on. We've always made sure we learned about what the issues were and then tried to figure out how to move things in the direction that we wanted to move in. So I think it's through collaboration with everybody involved and then trying to make a decision that's going to move you in the right direction.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have any other additional questions? No? Mr. Shea, thank you very much. I appreciate you coming. Next, going to call up Kevin Reisig.
Good evening.
Thank you.
I know most of you, but those that don't. Kevin Reisig, graduated Long Meadow High School 1989. Played 3 sports at the high school. Was a member of National Honor Society, member of Key Club. Then went on to Trinity College in Hartford and studied engineering. After Trinity College, went to Stanford University, got my master's in engineering, and then proposed never to go back to school because I went straight through. And lo and behold, I went back to Babson about 10 years later and got my MBA while having our second child at the same time. So I was working a full-time job and going to grad school at night with 2 children. From that point on, I've been a program manager both in the medical field and the aerospace field as a program manager, and dealing with all kinds of negotiations with suppliers, customers, personnel. And I think, you know, this experience will help me with this team moving forward.
Thank you. Armin?
Why the school committee? Why now?
Well, as you know, I was part of the finance committee back in 2011, 2012. Because I should mention, I have 3 children in the school system, one in the high school and 2 at Williams. And back in 2011, 2012, I was really concerned about the high school and the condition of the high school, and wanted to see the budget go through for my 3 students. Because I'm, you know, again, I've been here 30 plus years of my life and probably not leaving until at least my children are out of school, which is another 10 years. So I've been part of the community Not only with my children as coaches for soccer, basketball, lacrosse, but also a tutor for SAT for the last several years, tutoring some freshmen, sophomores, juniors, even seniors that are looking to get into schools. So, I've always been part of the community. I guess this is another way to help support the community moving forward.
As a former member of the Finance Committee, you saw a lot in the school committee, school department's budgets. What comments do you have about the way that on the inside things could be beneficial from your experience there, and what do you see as areas you'd like to question or have the administration and the other members of the school committee address?
Yeah, I think, a lot of times it's good communication. And I think that's going to be my answer for a lot of these questions. You got to have good communication no matter what, because a lot of times when we were on the Finance Committee, we didn't know why certain things were coming to us because of lack of communication. And we just had to deal with what was given to us, and sometimes information was incorrect because we didn't know all the details. And again, it just gets back to communication. And it might have been just saying, hey, we're going to table this and come back to it until we figure out the answers to some of our questions, rather than deciding then and there. And it's two-way communication. Not only the Finance Committee talking with the school committee, but also the school committee talking with the Finance Committee, and likewise the superintendent or whoever it might be, police department, fire department, looking for additional funding.
Okay, but there's nothing that you'd say, aha, I remember this from the Finance Committee, I want to see what we can do?
No, not any one particular thing, other than, negotiating the budget for the high school was the big thing back then, and, the amount of money that was dealt with at the time.
Thank you. Ryan?
Hey, Kevin.
Hi.
How can our district know when it has an effective school program, academically, socially, everything?
Well, one thing you can look at here, 2017, I think we were rated 18th in the district, right? So, just the accolades that we've seen, and, looking at the whole student body. We all know about the kids that are getting into Harvard and Yale, but you also have to think about the kids that are at the end of the spectrum, right? And what are they doing? And it comes down to graduation rate, and I'm sure the graduation rate is probably 98, 99%. But also ensuring that you're dealing with every single one of those students in between, the top 1% and the bottom 1%, and everybody in between, and evaluating all their needs and what is concerning each and every one of them moving forward.
Okay, so if there were some problems that developed between the school committee and the superintendent, how would you feel about working with a mediator to work through those difficulties?
Yeah, I think that's fine. I've dealt with a mediator going through a divorce myself several years ago. And, it helped both sides see from a open perspective the other side, right? And sometimes you're so focused on what's important to you, you don't see what's important to them. And it's enlightening sometimes to get a third party involved, to bring a fresh set of eyes into the situation. And again, it gets back to communication, right? And having that mediator possibly open up communications to different avenues
Yeah,
that you
think
didn't
you're right.
see.
You're right about communication, so, thanks, Kevin.
Onward.
I was wondering if you could just kind of describe what you think a good school committee meeting would look like.
Again, setting an agenda, right? Being a program manager, I hate going into a meeting without an agenda, or going to somebody's meeting and not knowing what's coming, right? So if everybody knows what's coming ahead of time, they can prepare their answers or negotiation topics moving forward, and setting time, right? The other worst thing is running over time when you've got other meetings or other obligations, an hour from now, and you're looking at a clock and you've been here an hour and a half and you're only on, topic 2. So setting limits to what can be negotiated, and having somebody keep that schedule on time.
Great, thank you.
Richard?
Yes, in your words, what would you feel the role of a school committee member is in providing management oversight for the superintendent?
So, again, it's the go between the student body, faculty, parents, and the superintendent, right, as a mediator and working together as a team to do what's right for all parties involved, whether it's the superintendent or the student body or the teachers, and acting as one team to collaborate and compromise and negotiate.
Where's your allegiance to?
Since I have 3 kids in the school system, the student body.
Well, student body, but refine it a little bit more, can you please?
Like I said earlier, looking at all the children, whether it be high school, middle school.
Is your
elementary.
allegiance to the educational system is understood by the entire group, or a complaining parent, or an irritated special interest group? I guess that's what I'm after.
Well,
Where's your base?
It could be different for certain topics, right? But you've got to look at the conglomerate whole, and what's best for the whole, not just one person. And again, the whole committee has got to be together as one team moving forward.
Okay.
Bill?
What do you see as the opportunities and challenges in this school district?
Well, we all know there's plenty of opportunities, but we also know the biggest challenge is getting past these last 6 months. I don't care to even talk about it one more minute and just move forward and look at those opportunities that are ahead of us and celebrate the small things. I think that's what we don't do, is celebrate even the small accomplishments and getting out there and saying, hey, this is what the school committee is doing now, moving forward, not looking back, looking forward.
Marie?
I talked earlier about the tax ceiling that's facing us. How comfortable are you going to be, and what experience do you have with dealing with having to look at cuts in a budget, especially with children in the school system?
So as a program manager, especially in the aerospace, we're constantly cutting budgets. And, I've had to deal with budgets of over $200 million when we're cutting 25% across the board. And it gets back to negotiation and looking at, hey, this is what we're looking at moving forward. What can we potentially move out to years, 2020, 2022, that isn't necessary this year because of budget cuts? And looking at, the most important top 3 things that need to get done this year and letting the other things slide. And understanding it's negotiation, because some of that money might come back and you could do 4 or 5 of the top things at the end of the year. If
Thank
needed.
you.
Good, thank you.
I want to just follow up on Marie's question. In the schools, we end up with, I don't know what the number is, the percentages, so it's probably 75 or 85% is salaries. I mean, you don't really get a chance to do that. So when it comes to, if you did have to cut the budget, you're literally cutting the heart of education, which is teachers. And so, how do you make, what basis would you use to make some of those tough decisions if it came to literally programs versus staff? And again, get down to it seems to always be music or art.
Yeah, trust me, I know both my parents were teachers. My father was at Fermi High School, my mother was in the Springfield school system. And we dealt with it all the time growing up. And it's tough, right? You gotta make, and as a program manager today, sometimes you gotta make tough calls. And again, it just gets back to communication and tell them, hey, this is what we're dealing with, and looking at alternative solutions, thinking outside the box, whether bringing in interns that are looking for college credits as help to the student body and student or school committee or teachers, helping out as interns, not making salaries, but getting college credits, for example.
Thank you. Ryan?
What information would you be looking for from the principals, whether it's budget cuts or other information about programs? What would you be interested in hearing about?
I think some of the best information that I've gathered or seen gathered is through surveys, anonymous surveys, whether it be principals, student body, faculty, parents, is, seeing what's hot on their minds and looking at the data and saying, all right, 80% of the people agree with this particular circumstance, and they're all against it, or they're all for it, and looking at where the data falls. And it can be done anonymously. So then you can collect that data and say, hey, it's not just one person, but it's 80% of the population that are concerned about this thing. We got to look at this. And then looking at the top 2 or 3 things and seeing what could be done.
Thank you.
Okay, so my next question is about group, and you've already kind of answered it a couple of times. You've talked about the importance of communication, having a good agenda, a group moving together, all together, trying to find consensus. Is there anything you'd add to that in terms of looking at a good working group, what you see as important?
Yeah. We've all been in groups where somebody's not pulling their weight, whether it be in high school or college, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you've got to get everybody pulling together at the same time, right? If you have somebody that's pulling the group down,
Yeah.
it hurts the whole group, right? Because I got to pull extra weight because so-and-so is not doing their job. So getting everybody working together, I think, is key. And, in one direction, not in 2 or 3 different directions.
Spoken like an engineer. Thank you.
Rhonda?
Speaking of engineering, what do you think about the current focus on STEM, and would you add anything or change anything?
Well, as you know, being an engineer at heart, I'm all for it. I mean, you look at our cars, you look at our houses, you look in this room. It's all technology, right? And this is where the opportunities are going to come years from now for these kids, whether it being replacing this microphone or replacing the circuits in the cars or the home systems that control your lights, your TVs, these are where the opportunities are going to come 10, 20 years from now.
Thank you.
Richard?
If you had it within your power to assemble the ideal school committee, what would the composition be?
A diverse background, right?
Give me a better explanation. What kind of people would you be looking for? What crafts? What type of people? What professions?
A diverse background, right? Somebody from education, somebody from corporate, somebody from universities, somebody older, somebody younger, somebody female, right? Because they all have different perspectives, different backgrounds, different ideologies, right? And I think if that group, as diverse as it may be, can work together, it's better for everybody.
We look like we've got a lot of applicants coming from academic background. Do you think it'd be a wise decision for us to staff an entire school committee with people that are working in the system?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Bill?
I'm good, thanks.
Marie?
Are you interested in a longer-term position? Have you pulled papers? Are you thinking of it?
I haven't pulled papers, but yes, I am.
You're thinking about it?
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
If you did decide to do it, would it be a 1, 2, 3-year position?
3-year.
3-year?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I believe you only have March 5th?
The papers
Stephen?
have to be taken out
By March
March
4th.
1st.
No, first
and
or second?
returned by the 5th.
Yeah,
Okay.
so if you really are thinking, you have to get your papers out really quick.
Okay.
Yeah, the town clerk.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Marvin?
I'm good, thank you, Mark.
What, I think often each member of a board or committee has a particular interest. What particular interest or new program would you like to bring to the through the school committee, to the Long Meadow School District and School Department to help make it a better program?
Well, I thought you were going to ask me about the special education, so I'll comment on that because it's very dear to my heart. My son has been in the program the last couple of years due to seizures while he's sleeping. He has trouble comprehending what he reads. He can't comprehend even 30 seconds after he reads it, what he just read. So I think emphasis on the special education program is very dear to my heart, and I think it needs to be looked at greatly. Because I know what he's going through and what some of the other students are going through, and the lack of resources sometimes that are available. I mean, granted, we moved to this community because of the school system, but I still think there can be more that can be done.
Okay, but how about so that's what you think you'd bring to the school committee, is trying to make a focus on special ed?
I think that's one area, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Ryan?
All set, thank you.
I'm set, thank you.
All set, thanks.
Richard?
As a follow-up, on the opposite side, what's your thoughts on gifted education?
On gifted education, you know, as a tutor, I'm going to be honest with you, what I see mostly are the gifted students, the students that want to get into Harvard, that want to get into Yale. And, you know, that was my job, is to get them to answer the last 2 questions on those tests correctly, even though it sometimes took me 10 minutes just to figure out the first time. So, you know, those kids don't need a whole lot, but it's just that one little extra push. And sometimes it's just a certain professor. I know I had a professor at Trinity that I always fall back on. And sometimes it's just that one little extra push that a student needs to go the extra mile, even though they're the gifted, right? But again, it gets back to potential. Some of these kids can, you know, be the next president of the United States if given the right push.
I guess, and I may be wrong, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I guess in high school we have a fair amount of programs that could be geared towards gifted, but as you drift on down into the crucial years, there seems to be a scarcity of programs being addressed. How's your feelings? What's your feelings about that?
Can you clarify what you mean?
Yeah,
by
down into the kindergarten on up
Okay.
through maybe 8th, 9th grade, there doesn't seem to be a lot of emphasis on gifted education, but there does, when you get into high school, we seem to be able to pick up a lot of gifted elements. What's your feelings on that?
I think other people have mentioned this. It's hard to figure out where you want to go, what you want to be when you're a 5th grader, 6th grader, right? Sometimes you're just dealing with so many different hormones and dealing with new kids coming into your school to focus on what you really want to do. But again, it gets back to just having the right teacher sometimes is key to that. And it's difficult to match up everybody with the right teacher every single year. But if you can affect 1 or 2 students.
So if I'm reading between the lines, you're basically not saying having dedicated programs. You talk about inclusion in the classroom presently.
I'm not saying no. I'm just saying I think it's difficult at that age to really focus on dedicated programs for the gifted children.
Yeah.
Because how do you know who the gifted children are at 10 years old?
Other states identify them in kindergarten, and they're identified and they're followed on through. So I mean, there's a lot of background in other states.
Yep.
To do it, but we and I think even East Long Meadow has a program, Marty.
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I don't think it's in the manner that you're describing, Richard. I think it's different.
Yeah.
I think it's more enrichment.
And I might be biased because I was a late bloomer myself.
Okay. Thank you.
Bill?
I'm all set.
Marie?
No further questions, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I do actually have a follow-up
Okay.
based upon Richard's line. So in the younger grades, we do have the math Olympiads. In the middle schools, we have the science Olympiad. They just competed down at MIT last week.
Yeah.
There's Lego robotics. There's a bunch of other enrichment programs that are being offered to children throughout the district. What would you want to see in addition to those kind of programs for those age groups?
Well, again, don't get me wrong. I'm not against that. My girlfriend's son is in the math Olympiads, and he's phenomenal, right? He raves about it, right? He raves about I know other children that rave about the robotics, right? I am not against it, especially being engineering, math, right? All for it. You know, what about the other arts? I know that earlier gentleman talked about, you know, liberal arts program. I went to Trinity, great liberal arts program. You know, wasn't able, you know, if I went straight engineering, I wouldn't have been able to take microeconomics or, you know, philosophy of sport, right? Or I didn't take dance, but, you know, there was the opportunity to take a dance class, ballet class, if I wanted to. But, you know, focusing on those other areas, because what you mentioned was mostly math and science. And again, it's dear to my heart. But, you know, maybe there's other opportunities. And giving those kids the opportunity is great, right? Not against it at all.
No, thanks.
Richard?
Yeah, I have a question. I have a comment back to what he was saying. We're not identifying gifted children. We are only, there's some clubs and all provided for children who want to go in, but we have no testing arranged
Point of order.
that
Yeah.
identify them.
Hold on, yeah, Rich, we're not discussing.
Well, he brought in the point at a rebuttal to me. So there's a point of order on both sides, Mr. Gold.
I asked a
And my
specific
question was
Mr. Gold.
directed at this gentleman, not at Mr. Ray.
Okay, direct your question, Richard, please, to,
And
Okay.
the discussion was going that way, and the rebuttal coming in from the side. We do not test children we have no identification program, do we, Mr. Superintendent?
In what sense? It's a complicated question whether.
Well, the
yeah,
actual.
and I don't think tonight's the night to have this discussion, but we'll have another discussion.
I don't think it's up to the audience to tell us what questions we're going to ask, by the way.
We're not going to.
And I apologize if I directed
No.
the answer in that way. I
No.
by no means meant to do that.
Okay.
No, I do have another a follow-up question or another question for you, and that is, as you can see of the candidates we have, many of them, or the applicants, many of them are teachers. They work in public school systems or at secondary education. Lacking that ongoing experience, where do you see your ability to interact with the superintendent of schools and a school committee who's trying to direct a business that literally you don't work in?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, both my parents were in school systems. My aunt is still the principal at Kensington in Springfield, right? So education has been in my family immediately for 48 years. And I don't think dealing with the school committee and superintendent is different than dealing with any other type of team, whether it be sports, academics, work environment, right? It's just learning how to compromise, collaborate, and work together.
Okay, thank you. Ryan?
All set.
So, thank you.
Ron?
All set, thanks.
Any other, Richard, any other
No.
questions? Bill?
All set.
Thank you.
I think we're all set. Thank you very much, Mr. Rising.
Thank you.
So I'd like to, our final applicant this evening is William Mitchell. So if you could
Thank you.
got a couple of minutes, I appreciate your sitting here for an hour and a half, and you got a couple of minutes to make a statement.
Yeah, at first I thought I was glad I got E, but now maybe I was wishing I'd gotten A. I am William Mitchell, as you know me on your paper there, but I go by Tim. Most of my friends know me as Tim. I think it's obviously important to state up front, I don't know any of you very well, and you don't know me very well, because I moved to Longmeadow in August. So I've spent, right at 6 months here in Longmeadow. A little bit of background there is I do have a fourth grader who goes to Center, and my wife and I do have 2 older children who are university students in Canada. So I have, gotten 2 through the early years and 1 more to go. And when we moved here, I'm at a stage in my career and life where I have a little more opportunity to get involved in things. And I had, started to look into and be interested in how I could maybe get involved in the community. And, while I have very little knowledge, unlike many of the others that have been here a long time, I have very little knowledge of some of the things that, the intricacies of the things that went down recently here. I looked at it as an opportunity once these positions became available for me to go ahead and find a way to plug myself into the community through the school committee, where I feel like I can offer some things. So I want to talk about that a little bit. I think it's important here, and as we've listened to the questions, I do have the benefit of that. It's important that you be a person who understands the importance of both the constraints and the responsibilities of the role that the school committee plays. And it's very clear as I read through the various materials that were given to me and available to me that, the primary role of the school committee is to review policy and establish these criteria to determine if those policies are being met. And I think this is one role where I provide some strong skills. First, my academic background, I am an accounting professor, and my research is in relation to incentives and budgeting in the workplace and how those incentives might motivate behavior of employees. And so I have a really strong understanding of performance measurement and how that impacts behavioral motivation of people that are involved. And secondarily, an important role is this role of budgeting that's been brought up several times. I am a CPA. I worked in public accounting initially in my career, and then I went to work for a couple corporations. One of those roles was as the manager of budgeting and forecasting for a large bank holding company. I've also worked in other operational roles. So, I'm very experienced with, these understanding what's important to departments and understanding, how to try to evaluate, the things that are important to be effective for that department and what its, role is in forwarding its mission, and then finding ways to not only measure that effectiveness, but to measure its efficiency in reaching those goals. So I think those are important things to note. Another point that I noted as I was going through is that one of the goals is to get the high school accredited by the board, and that's a kind of a goal for 2022. And this is a role, I'm the associate chair of the accounting department at the Eisenberg School of Management. And one of my big responsibilities is to do our piece of our accreditation process. And so I get involved in, I sit on our curriculum committee and involved in assessment of learning and various other activities related to that continuous improvement review that goes on. More generally, I want to be clear that I understand as well that the responsibility would be to represent the citizens of Longmeadow and not some personal agenda that I have. And I think that, it's important, I guess, as an accountant, maybe it comes from that. I take pride in objectivity and making sure that I understand, what are often two sides to a decision. Most decisions come down to a yes or no at some point. Do we do this or do we not? And maybe there's degrees along some continuum for a big decision that has a lot of little parts, but most every one of those at some point is a yes or a no. And it does become something that you have to understand what the implications are of the yes and the no. And they both do have implications. The other thing I just want to add before I close is that, I was happy to see that one of the goals that we have here in Longmeadow is for students to be prepared to handle change. Teaching them this appreciation for lifelong learning that's necessary to handle change. To kind of combine that policy and something that's been a philosophy of life that a friend of mine said a long time ago, I think it's important, it's unlikely, obviously, that we can prepare the road for our students. So it is important that we prepare our students for the road. And so I want to be a part of doing that here in Longmeadow. So thank you.
Thank you. Armin.
Wow, that was a lot. I answered it all. As an Alabama fan, I was going to say War Eagle, but I mean.
Well, thank you for saying War Eagle. Because that's the Auburn, not Alabama.
I know.
Just to clarify.
I saw that. So I guess based upon a very impressive resume we're looking here, how are you going to have the time to actively participate in the role of school committee?
Yeah, I mean, one benefit of working in academics is I have a lot of control over when I do the work that's necessary. So I'm not, I have classes I have to teach, and obviously I have to be in front of those classes, but I do have a lot of flexibility to work on things when I need to work on them. And so I do feel like I will have the time, without a doubt.
Are there any specific programs or ideas that you would like to bring to the Long Meadow Public Schools, perhaps that you've seen in other school districts, or that you've seen as a lack here that you'd like to bring through a role in the school committee?
Yeah, clearly I don't have enough experience here to have had time to see a lack yet of anything. So let's make that clear. And I honestly, I don't have something that I'm like, yeah, let's do this. I think it would be getting to come in and learn more about the system and what is available. I have seen various systems, and so I'm sure that I can draw from those in thinking about improvements that we might be considering, or maybe see a problem and recommend something. But I don't have something as I sit here tonight.
Thank you. Right.
You mentioned working in performance measurement and studying its effect on behavior. Has any of that research included public school districts? And if so, what did you find?
No, it does not.
Okay.
Obviously, I have some, when we think about that, obviously I've worked in academics and I understand that, this is different from a for-profit business, right? But the core principles remain the same. And I think an important thing to remember, and I think that's true here, I have a good friend who is at Ohio State University who does a lot of work with regard to nonprofit organizations. And the fact is that in these organizations, it is more about understanding how to set the goals with regard to effectiveness, because the efficiency measures, while they're very important to decide how we allocate funds, those measures are not as important on a day-to-day basis as trying to figure out, are we spending that money to reach the effectiveness goals that we have for our group. So,
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm thinking, what's more exciting, basketball at Kansas or football at AU? Oh, wait, strike that question. That's a too personal agenda. Well, let me move on to my standard question. But it's getting late, so if conflicts were to develop between the school committee and the superintendent, how would you feel about the school committee working with a mediator to work through those conflicts? How would that appeal to you?
Yeah, certainly, yes, there's no doubt that you need sometimes someone who can be totally outside of the situation to help both sides understand where they agree, and build on that. And when sometimes maybe they've gotten blocked by the things they don't agree about. So I think that can be a very useful process.
Okay, thank you.
What attributes do you think are essential for successful school committee members?
So I think that, one of the very important things, excuse me, one of the very important things is that, you be someone who is willing to listen and then willing to investigate what options might be, and then be willing to contribute those, and not take total ownership of your idea such that you can't hear other people's perspectives and how that they might view the situation, and that the committee then can work together to arrive at a more optimal solution.
Great, thank you.
Richard?
I'm going to pass right now.
Okay. Bill?
My standard question, I don't think works here. You've only been here 6 months, so you probably don't really know what the opportunities and challenges are of the school district. So my question would be, why do you want this appointment?
Well, I want it because I want to get involved, and I think that I do have, I can look down and I can see that I think I have some things that I can offer to the process. And while your question about the challenges, I certainly don't know the specific challenges to Longmeadow, but I will say that generally it's clear that we know in education that, the pace of technological change has probably for a long time, but certainly at this point, it is continuing to increase at an increasing rate. And it's always difficult for educational institutions we're really not the leaders usually in the change, right? We kind of see what's out there and then we respond to it by trying to bring our students up to that level of what's needed in the marketplace. And as that pace continues to accelerate, keeping up with that pace is a challenge that all organizations, not just academic institutions, face.
Thank you.
Marie?
Are you looking to apply for a more permanent position in the spring? Are you running for election?
Yeah, I am. I learned I've got to get on the ball a little bit more. I didn't realize didn't have as much time as I did, so I'm glad to know that now.
And are you talking about 1, 2, 3-year term? Have you thought about that?
I honestly had not thought about that. You know, there's pros and cons for both, and I can see, you know, one of the advantages of the 1 year being someone that's new here, that might be easier to sell, you know, those that vote for someone new to give me a shot at 1 year instead of having to commit to me for 3 years. So I see at this point my thinking leaning in that direction, but not because I don't want to do it for longer, but just because, you know, I do have to go out and campaign, and it might be a little easier to convince the citizens that I could serve in a 1 year term, and then maybe I might be worthy of a 3 year term.
And hopefully, if that doesn't work out for you, consider Finance Committee, Select Board.
Certainly.
This is a town of volunteers, and we'd love to have you on board. Thank you.
Armin?
I'm good, thank you.
Yeah. What systems do you have, are you familiar with, or have you used that in terms of evaluating the performance, particularly how you evaluate the performance of a superintendent?
Well, again, I think that it's important. I mean, I've managed people. I think it's important, again, that you have a set of goals, and then you try to figure out how can we measure the goals that we have for that person. Not all of those are easily measured, and I think you have to be thoughtful about thinking about both what we think of as internal measures, you know, that are more closer to, in this case, the students and the things they're doing on a day-to-day basis, and then looking at some appropriate external measures about how our students are performing, how their opportunities to get into universities, and their opportunities then to advance and go into the workplace. So all these are part of that, and it's not an easy process, but one that does take a lot of thought in developing those. And I have experience doing that, and I certainly understand the theory and fundamentals behind doing that process.
Thank you, Ryan.
You mentioned earlier that the high school is going through the accreditation process, and part of that process is defining the vision of a graduate. So as a member of higher education, could you describe what you think of as the ideal high school graduate?
Well, I think that ideal is to have someone have the foundational level that they need and the exposure to items that allow them to, you know, be prepared and get those opportunities at the next level, at the university level, and then leverage that forward. And I think, as some others said earlier, I mean, one of those things is giving students a variety of opportunities so that they can try some things. I would say that's one advantage that we saw. My daughter spent all of her high school years in Canada, and my son spent 3 years. That Canadian schools they do have more variety within the high school, more choices for the students, and allow them to explore a little bit more. It's a little more challenging here because of the way we measure students for university versus how that they do so. So these are tough things to balance, you know, but it is recognizing, offering things so that people can make choices, because not everyone is going to want to do the same things.
All right, thank you.
All right, Tom?
Yes, it would be nice if we had a grade 13 then you could fit some of that stuff in.
Well, that's optional now.
We don't have that. Oh, it's optional up there?
Yes, it's no longer required.
Okay, well, so the other thing is, in terms of groups, I mean, it sounds like you've had a lot of experience, and what would you say are the main components of an effective group? So if we look at the school committee, we want an effective group. What would be the things you'd want to see happen?
Well, I think it's important that any group, I mean, this group needs to be, as we've said, Long Meadow's doing a lot of things right, you know, and the key is to keep those things going and then make the tweaks that are necessary to actually then advance even above and beyond that. And I think the effective group is going to be one that quickly and efficiently handles the required things so that they can have time to take a look at, investigate, and make decisions about ways that improvement can happen.
Thank you, good answer. Okay.
Ron?
I'm all set, thanks.
Rich? Bill?
Almost set, thanks.
Marie?
Fine, thank you.
I have a question for you about budgeting. Do you have any experience in, obviously as a CPA and other things, but in terms of what I'll call municipal budgeting, which is a whole different kind of experience, and in terms of what you might bring to it in terms of your experience in budgeting, and also Marie had alluded to in one of her previous questions to a previous applicant about coming to a budget crunch ceiling and how we might use tools to evaluate how do you tighten a budget if you have to.
Yeah, I mean, as you raised to some of the candidates, it's quite difficult in education because so much of the budget is already pre-committed to. And you don't have the flexibility to go in and out of staff.
You
and
don't buy
faculty.
enough paper clips to cut the budget on paper clips.
Yeah, you can't cut the budget on paper clips. But the thing is, if you become a system that's known as one that where teachers don't have, don't feel like it's going to be a long-term thing, then teachers are not going to invest as much in that particular community, and they're going to be looking at the other opportunities where there's more money in the system. Not more money for them, but more money so that they know there's that security there. So it is really tricky. I think, in the end, you do come back to some of the core principles. You mentioned while the municipality is different, and I haven't worked a lot with municipalities, but the thing is that while how we go about the accounting and some of the peculiarities are peculiar to those things, the fundamentals when it comes to deciding about how we allocate money are pretty straightforward. I mean, we have to evaluate the value that money is providing and decide, is that continuing to provide value, or is that something we can give up? I mean, businesses are in a similar position in most cases. They can't really command the price that they get, the income side, and we as a school board don't really control that side that much on what the inflow is. It's all about then making sure we allocate that outflow to the right places to reach as many of the goals as we possibly can. So.
Okay. Anybody else have any other questions? I think we pretty much, Richard.
I had one quick one. Have you ever participated in an exercise of program cuts?
No.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else have any other questions?
Thank you.
I just have one more question.
Go ahead, Bron.
I was just wondering what, like one or two qualities you think would be most essential that you could bring to the committee?
Well, I think, again, objectivity, I think, is very important, and I think that is something that I pride myself in, is, really considering the viewpoints, again, as I said, on both sides, that, usually, again, when people bring something up and wanna and take a position, they've usually put thought into that. And so, understanding where that comes from and how that can be incorporated into the final decision, I think, is an important role and something that I try hard to do.
Great, thank you.
Marie?
Quick question. What name do you go by? Is it
Tim.
Tim? You go by Tim. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's that Southern tradition of going by your middle name.
I do that too, so.
You do?
Yeah, my first name's Karen. 12 years later, you find this out.
You never signed the papers.
Never looked at them. Okay. Tim, thank you very much. I
Thank you.
appreciate you coming, and I don't know if I owe everybody an apology for making this 2 nights instead of 1 night, because based on 5 people in 2 hours, we might have been able to squeeze in 5 more people in the next 2, but I'm not sure any of us wanted to sit here for another 2 hours tonight. And so we will be back here tomorrow night at 7 o'clock with 5 additional candidates. I'm going to, before we suspend this meeting, we're not going to adjourn the meeting, we'll just suspend it. That way it'll be one continuous meeting. What I wanted to do is just make everybody aware of the process that we're going to be using on March 5th when we vote for this. What we'll be doing, you can hold that, Bill. You're gonna have the same,
tomorrow?
no, we're not. We're gonna use the same
Number?
sequence. Yep, got to keep your number.
I
We're gonna
don't
use the
want
same.
this All the questions get asked to.
So, what we're going to do on March 5th is we're going to go through and in the reverse order that we ask questions. So it'll be Marie first, and then Bill Lowe, and then Richard Foster, then Bronwyn, and then Tom Lacusa, then Ryan Kelly, then myself, and then Armin Ray. We will vote in that order. And what we will do is ask each person to vote for up to 4 people in each cycle. So you'll go through and we'll have a tally sheet. People will be tallying. We'll vote for up to 4 people. Should 4 candidates receive, because there are 8 of us, 5 or more votes, they will get appointed. Should nobody receive that, we'll eliminate the candidates with the fewest number of votes and then re-vote. You are not, according to our town council, required to cast votes, but I'm going to ask people that if you don't vote for people, if you only cast 3 votes the first round, that, we're not, I don't want people to do bullet voting is, I guess, what I'm coming around to say. So let's try to get this done as quickly as possible. We won't enforce too many rules, but we are not obligated to appoint 4 people. We're obligated by law. We're going to have to get through 1. I hope we do appoint 4 people. Anyway, with that comment, and we will pick up here tomorrow night at 7 p.m. I'll entertain a motion to suspend the meeting until then.
So moved.
Is there a second? Richard?
Second.
Yes.
Tom seconded? Yep. Motion's made by Mr. Lowe and seconded by Mr. Lacusa. All those members of the Select Board in favor? Vote is 5-0. Thank you very much, folks. We'll see you tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Same time, same station.